I worked for a long time on this farm in Italy, and they had so many tomatoes during the summer of all types that inevitably a lot of them would just end up in the sauce. Everything, any tomato went in the sauce because it was either that or they were gonna rot. And the sauce was amazing. They were always working with this mixture. It was never just one variety. So most of the year when I'm making tomato sauce, I'm using canned tomatoes. Canned tomatoes are picked when they're ripe, they're canned at the peak of their freshness, and you really can make a good sauce with it. But for a short window of time, the peak of summer, we have really great fresh tomatoes, and we want to take advantage of that and make a sauce that actually tastes like fresh picked tomatoes. You get more flavor if you introduce other tomatoes. So I want to get a little bit of a blend going, mostly plum tomatoes, but a good mix with some others as well to amp up the overall flavor of the sauce. So what I'm looking for here are just nice ripe looking plum tomatoes, and this is basically like a paste tomato. It's a sauce tomato. It has a lot of flesh, not that much like juicy seeds and stuff, and that's gonna be really good to make a thicker sauce. I got some tomatoes. This kind of tomato, beefsteak tomatoes, are not tomatoes you would traditionally put in a tomato sauce because they're much more watery. But I like to slip a few in, more than a few. We should definitely get some sun-gold. It's a little bit crazy to put cherry tomatoes into a big batch of tomato sauce, but these sun-golds have such good flavor almost always that I can't help but throw a couple pints in. Oh, and basil. All right, let's make some sauce. Here's the thing with making tomato sauce. We have kind of opposing goals. On the one hand, we want the sauce to taste like fresh tomatoes if we're using fresh tomatoes to make the sauce. On the other hand, we want it to have a deep, rich, round, sweet flavor. The challenge is, to taste fresh, we don't want to cook the sauce for long. To taste deep, rich, and round and sweet, we need to cook it a long time. These two things do not agree with each other. So what I do is I end up making a blend. My sauce is a little bit more complicated than most, but it delivers an infinitely better flavor than a lot of other recipes because I make a super sweet tomato concentrate. I make a kind of bulk sauce, and then I make a fresh sauce that I cook very little. And I blend them all together at the end, and I hit all those notes. I love tomatoes. Tomatoes are delicious and nutritious. First, I take about 10 pounds of plum tomatoes, which I'm gonna weigh out right here. And I'm gonna keep them just plums, because I'm gonna make a really sweet tomato paste from them in the oven. Okay, I'll wash these. You don't need to worry about the stem end. You don't need to worry about pretty much anything because the strainer is gonna get all that stuff out. These don't need to be nice cuts, they don't need to be perfect cuts. Just breaking the tomatoes down a little bit so that the heat gets into them faster. Have them, chunk them, whatever. The idea here is just to break these tomatoes down. Cook them just enough to soften them so that I can pass them. But they still have, right at this point, a very fresh flavor. Okay, here we go. So the food mill is to get rid of all the skin and seeds. And this is the fastest, easiest way to do it. And I really like using commercial ones just because this is a home food mill and I just find that they tend to be really dinky and they don't really do a great job, especially when you're trying to do a large quantity of something. It's a little thin, but pretty good consistency considering that it's only been cooked for 10 minutes. That's why the plum tomatoes are good as a sauce tomato because look how it's already got this viscosity to it. I'm actually gonna cook this down a lot more and practically turn it into tomato paste. If you're wondering why you can't just open a can of tomato paste and put it in here, it's because commercial tomato paste does not have the sweetness or the flavor of what you do when you do this on your own. It won't accomplish the task at all. It's the slow reduction in that low oven that really brings out the sweetness of these tomatoes so much. You don't get the same effect in a pot. Plus it would take forever in a pot because you wouldn't have the same surface area for evaporation. Homemade tomato paste. And these were just the plum tomatoes, the paste tomatoes. So in this other portion of the sauce, we've got the plum tomatoes still in the batch because we want that fleshy consistency to help give us a sauce that has some body without a ton of cooking. But we're also mixing it in with other tomatoes like these red tomatoes. I'm just chunking them in. They're gonna add more water, but they're also gonna add more flavor. I'm just gonna go ahead and dump in my cherry tomatoes. I don't even take the stems off. A little bit of the tomato stem or vine can add a really nice fresh tomato flavor, and it's not poisonous, even though some people say it is. So I take my nice mixture of tomatoes here, and I reserve 1 quart, which I will not cook any further so I can preserve that really fresh tomato flavor. And then the rest of it, I'll cook down a bit more to get a thicker consistency. Get ready, get ready. If you do want to add the aromatics like onions and garlic, now's the time to do it. I don't want to brown them, I just want to get them translucent and sort of nice and sweet. So I don't put the basil in too early because I like to preserve the basil's fresh flavor. But towards the end, for the last few minutes, I just chuck it right into the sauce, a nice big sprig of it. It's like the 3 bears, you know, Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear sauces. And it's crazy because if you taste them, this one still tastes like raw tomato. It's got this real freshness to it, which I want in my tomato sauce. I want my fresh tomato sauce to taste like fresh tomatoes. Otherwise, I could just pop a can of tomatoes. Wow, all right. This one is incredibly flavorful, and you get all those layered aromatics. You get the basil. There's a real sweetness to it, which is developed from the concentration and the long cooking, plus the onions. It's really good. This all by itself is an excellent standalone sauce. And then you come to this one, and it's like tomato candy. It's so concentrated. It's so sweet. It's bonkers. Like, I could just eat this for breakfast or dessert. So what I'm gonna do is I'm now gonna take all 3 and smash them into one sauce. And the idea is you're gonna get these sweet base notes here, all this richness and depth. This again is just sort of holding down the fort. This is your basic delicious tomato sauce. And this is gonna give you all those fresh top notes that they're gonna make you know you're eating a tomato sauce that was actually made from fresh tomatoes and not from a can. So the big moment, let's do it. So in goes this sweet tomato paste. Stir that in. My fresh tomato sauce. And I am left with one big pot of sauce. This is obviously a sauce you can use for anything, anywhere tomato sauce is called for, but I really like to feature it in places where you get the sauce front and center. So a really obvious one would be just served with some spaghetti. It'd be great in some eggplant parm and, you know, spooned onto a pizza.